It all started with a phone call that didn't make sense, one that shook me from my usual Saturday morning routine. A local developer, someone I'd never spoken to in my life, called to finalize the closing paperwork for the sale of my land lot. I nearly dropped my coffee. "What sale?" I asked, already feeling the weight of something deeper brewing. "The HOA approved it," the man replied casually, as if I had agreed to it all weeks ago. But I hadn't. I owned that land. Outright. Title in hand, taxes paid, no liens, no negotiations, nothing ever listed. And now someone was claiming I'd agreed to sell? That's when I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone, likely the HOA, had tried to sell my land behind my back. What they didn't know and would soon regret finding out is that I'm not just any homeowner. I'm a licensed real estate attorney with over 25 years of experience in property law, zoning disputes, HOA enforcement cases, you name it. And I don't play games when it comes to land, especially land I've owned long before this HOA even existed. My story begins years earlier when I bought a quiet plot on the edge of a wooded subdivision, meant to one day build a home there after retirement. The area was peaceful then, no HOA in sight, just a group of neighbors who all respected boundaries. But as more houses popped up, so did the inevitable formation of an HOA, initially sold to everyone as a casual maintenance committee. Slowly, that committee evolved into a full-fledged association with power-hungry board members and arbitrary rules. They offered me membership multiple times, but I always declined. Legally, they couldn't force me in. My parcel was never deed-restricted or under their original CC&Rs. Still, they treated me like I was under their thumb, sending letters, reminders, and dues invoices I never paid because I didn't owe them a thing. I let it go. Until now. After the developer's call, I started digging. My instincts told me this wasn't an accident. I requested the sale documents. What I saw made my blood boil. There was a forged declaration claiming the parcel was unclaimed and had reverted to the HOA through something they called a quiet title process. Problem was, a quiet title action has to go through court, and there was no court record, no legal filing, no judge's order. It was all a fake. The deed they tried to use had my parcel ID but was signed by someone claiming to represent the HOA's Land Recovery Committee, which doesn't even exist. That's when I knew this went deeper. I submitted a public records request to the county clerk and planning department. What I found was that a board member, specifically the HOA president, had submitted proposed redevelopment plans that included my parcel. She'd been negotiating a bulk lot deal with the developer for months, promising access to common ground expansions, and using internal HOA votes to push the deal forward. All without my knowledge. At this point, I had everything I needed to strike back. But I didn't want to just win quietly. I wanted to teach them a lesson. I drafted a full cease and desist letter, filed an emergency injunction to block any title transfers, and prepared a civil fraud complaint. But the real power move came next. I printed full-color packets, over 40 pages each, containing my findings, legal breakdowns, fraud documentation, forged deeds, and excerpts from the county charter. Then I showed up unannounced to the next HOA board meeting, dressed in a crisp suit and carrying a box of folders. They didn't recognize me at first. Most had never actually seen me before. As the president started her usual meeting script, I calmly stood up and passed a packet to each homeowner in the audience. "Before we begin," I said, "I'd like to share how this board tried to illegally sell land they don't own. Mine." The room went silent. Dead silent. I walked through the timeline, showing proof of the forged documents, unauthorized filings, and private communications I had pulled from public servers. The president stammered. One board member turned red and stared at the table. Another walked out. By the time I was done, homeowners were flipping through the pages in shock. One elderly woman even stood up and said, "They did this to my daughter's property too." What followed was a tidal wave. A petition was started that night to recall the entire board. A vote was held the following week. The president and 2 other members were removed. A special audit was ordered, and it revealed that this wasn't the only shady land deal they had tried. At least 2 other unclaimed lots had been quietly absorbed and flipped for profit. Legal charges followed. Not major ones, but enough to force restitution and community-wide reform. They had tried to push out homeowners who didn't conform, didn't comply, or didn't play ball. But this time they picked the wrong person. They tried to steal land from a real estate attorney who knew every loophole, every statute, and exactly how to expose them. In the weeks that followed, the HOA was rebuilt from scratch. Transparency rules were passed. Mandatory public votes were established. And as for me, I kept the land. Untouched, undeveloped, but fully and legally mine. Sometimes I drive by, just to remind myself of how close they came. And every time I do, I smile, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because when someone tries to take what's yours, you don't just get angry. You get smart. You get loud. And if you're lucky enough to know the law better than they do, you get justice. So, to anyone out there who's ever been bullied by a board, threatened by fine-happy enforcers, or pushed into a corner by people with too much power and too little oversight, remember this: they may run the meetings, but they don't own your rights. Know them, use them, and never let anyone take what's legally and rightfully yours.